On the Way to Kluusms is the first poetry chapbook to be published by Watershed Press, a bioregional press based in Seattle, but with strong connections to Vancouver Island. The author is Lorin Medley, whose poetry has been published in anthologies like Winter in America Again, Cascadian Zen Volume 2, and Drift, Poems and Poets from the Comox Valley. Lorin lives, gardens, and writes from her home in Comox, British Columbia, the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, and is our guest today to talk about On the Way to Kluusms, what it means to live in place and how we disconnect from ourselves. Lorin, welcome.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
It's a delight to have you in this encounter, in this venue, however you want to say it. Tell us about your first experiences ever with poetry.
Oh, poetry has been a way of being in the world, I think, since I was very young. I just kind of remember being enamored by rhyme, as I think most children are, um, and being a kind of a dreamy little child, and then that just stayed with me through school and high school. And it's always just been a way of being in the world, I think.
Did parents read poems to you, or did you have an experience in grammar school, or what was it like?
Uh, let's see. Parents didn't read poems to me, but well, I won a poem contest in grade one, if that counts.
And the winning hasn't stopped.
On our kitchen wall, there is a clock. All year long, it goes tick tock.
Wow.
Yeah.
From a long line of Canadian clock poems, including Bruce Coburn's Who Put the Bullet Hole in Peggy's Kitchen Wall. Kitchen poems, I guess, not clock poems. Anyway, who were some of your early teachers or guides as you began to write and get more serious about your connection to poetry?
Well, I think I was always a fan of Keats in high school.
But Brad Robinson, is it?
Oh, Brad Robinson for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell us about how you met him, what he communicated to you that made sense then and now to some extent, and what he meant for your
Mm,
poetry existence.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I've been thinking a lot about him lately. I think his birthday was in March. And I met Brad. I know I was underage to go into the bar, so that would make me 18 here in BC. And Brad, he lived in Comox. He he was used to be a columnist for the Georgia Strait in the 70s. And his nom de plume was Ingledink Bird Humper at that time. Yes, it's true. So a bit of a character. Um, and it was through Brad really that I first heard about George Bowering and uh, Barry McKinnon and Jerry Gilbert and the Tish poets. And that's when those names first started, sort of came into my sphere.
What years would this have been?
And whoa,
Mid 70s.
that for Brad, that was the mid 70s. Now I mean, I'm coming up on 68,
Six,
so
so 50 years ago.
that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And by the time Brad moved to Comox, he was a bit of a fixture at the Lorin Hotel in Comox. Had a drinking problem for sure. He lived in a little, we called it the hovel, sort of jokingly, um, because it was a hovel at the end of a road in Comox. And I mean, Brad was the poet, and I think what let me just backtrack a bit. When I went to UVic, which was the first year out of high school, I discovered Brad Robinson in the archives. And at that time, it was pre-cell phone, and I went into the archives and I hand wrote everything I could find, that he had written. And ended up, years later, I lived with Brad for, well, we were together for maybe 5 or 6 years. Tried to break up with him several times. Um, he was a bit of a character. But he had this poetic mind that I resonated with so much. And so he had that thing that I call poetry, in the way that he experienced the world. Yeah, and eventually I moved to Toronto to go to massage school, and that was kind of my final way of breaking up with Brad. But then, of course, he moved to Toronto shortly after that, so it didn't quite work. But yeah, I honor him as a poet, um, very much.
You mentioned in a couple occasions that he did connect you to sort of the Black Mountain poets and that whole ethos.
Hmm. Well, it was part of his sort of conversation, Paul. And I mean, at the time, I didn't know about the Black Mountain poets. I hadn't learned about them in school, or so it was very, very new to me. Um, and what's really interesting and beautiful right now in my life is that I feel like now I've come full circle back to learning more about the Black Mountain poets, and through the Cascadia Poetics Lab workshops, and there is this beautiful sort of full circle of knowing nothing about them, but hearing them and being interested, catching these things that I'm curious about, and they may sort of be in the back of my consciousness for years and years, and then they appear again, and you sort of grab for them. Um, so that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I was listening to your launch from, I believe it was August 22nd, 2025, at the Artful Gallery to prepare for this. And you said something that I found very interesting. You talked about being a trauma counselor, for one. That's one thing that I picked up from that. Um, and I wonder, and there's one other thing, but I wonder about the trauma counselor part. That's got to be great training to deal with poets. You know, I mean, you just started with Brad, a great influence, a lover, and a person who was an alcoholic stalker. I mean, not so many words. I mean, that wasn't his whole existence, but certainly that was a part of it. So, being a trauma counselor, and you weren't at the time you were with Brad, but being that has probably helped you get underneath some of the fucked up things that poets do to each other.
Well, I think being a trauma counselor has been a great training in listening deeply, um, and in developing my own ability to be present, both as a human being and as a poet. And I don't actually see a big separation between those two things. Um, Amazing things can happen given a safe, familiar space and connection with another human being, that is free of judgment, where you don't move away, but you're just there. And to me, I mean, I feel blessed that I've had these years of that particular kind of training and presence, because it serves me in poetry. It serves me as a human being. And I think, um, yeah, I think it's a way that I will just continue to navigate the world.
You probably can't help it by now. It's so much a part of you. But two things that you mentioned seem to me really perfect for poetry, the ability to listen deeply and the ability to be free of judgment or to transcend the ego, which is really where the source of all poetry comes from, a place beyond ego, I think. And I think Whitman did, and many others whose poetry I admire. The other part of that talk was that you say people disconnect from themselves. How do you mean that? How does it manifest?
Well, it can manifest in many different ways. Actually, just this morning, I was reflecting on some of the things going on in the States, and in particular, this thing that is, what are they calling it? The MAGA look or something, where women are using Botox to change their appearance, their face, and it's a very frozen quality. So the Botox paralyzes certain muscles of expression in the face. And and that's one way I think of how we disconnect, is by frozenness, right? Going kind of numb. Other ways are going more diffuse, in our presence, where we just kind of float off somewhere. Um, we can go absent in our bodies, not really sensing being here. So so there are lots of way becoming very judgmental is another way. I think where the disconnect actually begins with a high activation level in the body, right? Where your fight or flight system is on board, and then we go up into this kind of judgmental headspace of right and wrong, and rather than being in that presence in our bodies that is about empathy and curiosity, and happens when we feel safe. Um, so those are some ways that we disconnect.
Love for you to read a poem. Um, we breathe in bodies of unceded territory. Um, I prefer for the talk about it to be after. A lot of people, you see this at open mics, people talk about the poem beforehand or they kind of explain it. But I'd love for you to read it and then we can discuss after if that makes sense to you.
Sure. We breathe in bodies of unceded territory. Near my place of residence, I heard Mrs. Mary Clifton. Je j'aime, she said. Tree. So I began to fill in the woods. Babe in the lost in the red artifacts of violence. Mountainsides, femicides, bare sloped shoulders. Je j'aime. It's cold as fuck out here. Language lost in the words. Sunshine slant through Salal. Woodpecker drum tenders rattle the chimney vent. Time signature 1876, the Indian Act. My friend Danny just wants to fish, so don't ask him about it. His uncle on the old $5 bills, BC Packers Salmon Seiner number 45, Ripple Point, 1958, the year I was born, sockeye season. An apparition appeared today on the trunk of Chamaecyparis lawsoniana stewartii. Yellow-bellied sapsucker, I want to say sapper, tapped a tree, uplifted the code. Wait, the operation has branched out. Said bird, gone to the other side, HB pencil-sized crop circles. Hummingbirds chip and sip sequential zeros. Time signature 2024. Sign here, signatories. There's a bee in the woods outside the big house. Also an eagle tree. A sign. Gela Kesla. Everything relates to everything. Red dresses hang on hangers in trees. Wind stranges the quiet.
What an incredibly beautiful reading of a poem that is. I mean, just the way you deliver it. It was delivered very similarly, I think, on August 22nd. And as I look on the page, I see, it seems to me, the page as a perfect score for how it should be read, with the pauses, the timing, the emphasis. Um, have you been doing that for a while, using the page as a score?
Well, I would say only in the last 5 or 6 years. And it feels much more natural to me, than kind of the way I grew up in a more poetry in a more prescribed form. Um, yeah, so it's in some ways it's fairly recent, but I like it. It feels comfortable. It feels sort of more authentic somehow to my experience of the poem.
Mhm. The line before the last, red dresses hang on hangers in trees, is a gesture towards the disappeared indigenous women
Yeah.
of Canada. And so this is a reminder that many women have just gone missing.
Yeah.
And the unceded territories, which is in the title, can you elaborate on what unceded territory is and why it is so important for you to note it?
I live in Comox, and I'm maybe 5 minutes there's a hill coming up into Comox off of Comox Road, and the Comox First Nation is sort of at the bottom of the hill. So to get from my place into Courtney, where I worked for many years, where I went to high school when I was younger, I would ride my bike along that route past the Comox First Nation. Um, and so it's been a part of physically been a part of my life for many years, but also, I mean, I've been in that territory without, in the early part of my life without really knowing it and understanding the history of it. And so the unceded territory, to me, when I ride my bike down that hill and I see the red dresses hanging hanging on this tree and the wind blowing through the dresses and um, really understanding what that signifies in Canada. Um, I think it's like I just can't imagine being here and living here without wanting to understand that and getting to know it more deeply. Um, and certainly through my work, I also had, I worked with some indigenous women. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from them. Um, so the unceded territory here in Comox, close to where I live, um, I don't know, Paul. It's just a way of I th it's a way of living deeply, I suppose. Really understanding what is this land and sea and space that I live in, and who else has lived here, and how has that shaped my experience of being here.
And legally, the land has never been ceded. It's literally true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The question that begs the question, how does a daughter of settlers wade into territories involving indigenous people, especially in Canada, where the issue is incredibly more sensitive than it is here in the States?
Mhm.
It's a tight wire. It's a tough line to follow, and yet you navigate it with skill. But tell us about wading into these kinds of subject matters.
Yeah. In the writing of some of the poems in On the Way to Kluusms, one of the things I really struggled with was I found myself in early drafts of some of the poems running up against the cultural appropriation, finding myself doing that like not consciously, and feeling really uncomfortable with that. Um, and so it was quite a process for me to, I guess, to come to understand through the writing of the poetry the ways in which I have been ignorant living on the land, and the ways that cultural appropriation is kind of insidious. And so when I found my way, the way I found my way through that was was asking myself, well, whose voice is this? And realizing that putting my voice in it as in a way as an ignorant settler was very important and very honest. Um, so that's how I one of the ways I navigated that territory.
You say the scientific name for yellow-bellied sapsucker so well. I see it on the page. I don't even want to attempt it. And you say it in the poem just so naturally. It seems like this is territory, this, this scientific name, the Latinate name for the yellow-bellied sapsucker. Can you say that again?
Okay, this is actually the scientific name of the tree.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, and it's Chamaecyparis lawsoniana stewartii, which I love saying.
You do love saying it. It is, it's poetry, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. Much beloved tree in my front yard.
What kind of tree is that?
It's a type of cedar tree.
Huh.
And
I had no idea.
it was identified by a gardening person who one summer my garden was on the garden tour, and someone came along and said, "Oh, you have a Chamaecyparis lawsoniana stewartii." I said, "Do I?"
Let me write that down.
Let me write that down. Let me write that down and savor saying it.
Yeah.
Let me get it into a poem somewhere.
Why put that into a poem? That's strange. People don't know. I didn't even know it. I thought it was a sapsucker, for instance. And I think I'm at least average intelligence. So why put that kind of language in a poem? You like saying it. Maybe that's all you need.
Well, there's something about language that really interests me. I mean, I could relate to this tree as a tree. I could call it a cedar, or I could call it this. I think we relate to things differently by the way we language them. And so that's what's I think that's why it's in there. It's like when I relate to that tree in that way, it's like there's a certain delight in it. There's a history and a way of looking at that tree by naming it that I bring in as well. Um,
Magic,
magic.
don't you think?
Well, the magic of words, the magic of language, I suppose.
Hmm. Hmm.
What it evokes in us,
Hmm.
which is the sound, it's the history, there's so much behind what word we choose, what language we choose to speak in.
Another thing that I love about your work is the syntax. Ezra Pound was concerned in 1912 or so that moving away from inherited forms and meters would lead to mediocre prose being chopped up into lines and being called poetry. And he was rather prophetic. But you avoid that. I mean, we can dissemble your poem and put it all as a prose paragraph, and it's not going to read like mediocre prose. So, um, how do you do this? This is, I mean, I think it's an art. It's one of the things I do when I see a poem is like, can I break it up? Can I dissemble it, put it back into prose and see if it's mediocre prose? And often it is, but yours isn't. And I think it's rare. Tell us how you achieve that.
That's a hard question. Um,
You said you rework the poems, so you're working through different drafts. So do you take out conjunctions, connecting words, and all kinds of things? Do you take out adverbs, or do you take out the ly in the adverbs or the ing in gerunds? Tell us
Yeah.
what you
Yeah,
do.
I do those things for sure. That's kind of in the background of what I do. And then after that, I don't know how to say this, but it's just something about listening again. I can't put words to it. Um, Listening to the sound of what I'm creating. Um, Sometimes when I edit, I'll edit from sound, um, and let the tones or the consonants kind of pull me along.
Sun shines slant through Salal, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times alliteration is done in a gratuitous way. I think George Bowring was the one who brought this to my attention. And yet there's so many S's in that sun shines slant through Salal. There's at least five. There's one per word in the line. There's five words, and the shines has two S's. So the S's are very present here, but it doesn't sound like Peter Piper picked the pickled peppers, that kind of thing. It sounds very natural, and it sounds beautiful. And I think that's the difference between something that's authentic and something that's kind of a trope or a gimmick or something like that. Yeah. Tell us, you've lived in the Comox Valley all your life, almost all your life, except for that time in Toronto, I guess. Um, what do you love about that place?
Oh, what don't I love? Um,
No
uh,
museums,
no, well,
I mean,
we do have a museum
yeah.
in Courtney. I love the landscape. I love the landscape. I love the mountains. I love the sea, the cloud formations, um, the salal, the cedars, the seals, the seaweed. I just love the landscape here. The glacier, the Queenish that we see in the background. I think one of the things about living somewhere for a long time is, at least for me in the Comox Valley, has been I just love it more and more. And writing about it and writing from this place, I think it just deepens my love for the place. And then getting to know the people in this place who are part of the history of the Comox Valley. Again, poetry leads me deeper into that, and then I love it even more. And I just think, wow, these characters and persons and creatures that inhabit this part of the world are they're I'll say mythic, but they're all sort of heroic in some way.
Yeah. I'm reminded of that poem of yours. I was looking at it. It mentions the Stagger Inn, which is well, it's the first poem in the book. Clams and Cockles, a brief story at the Stagger Inn, which goes into a bit of the history of the place. Maybe reading that would be a good idea. Would you like to do that?
Sure, I'd love to. Um, and just as I bring that up, um, so the part of Comox where this takes place, this poem, has just been like literally in the past week. The town of Comox has purchased 2.6 hectares of land, and it is now the Newson Family Nature Park. So very exciting. As this poem is dedicated to Kella Newson. Um, so I'm happy to read it. Clams and Cockles, a brief stay at the Stagger Inn for Kella, 1955 to 2023. December's moose-antlered reindeer pull the sleigh along Kella's dock. Yellow, green, red strings of light lit for the season. And the mean old Grinch's self in place of the fat man, fishnet illuminated blue. Let's do the stairs at Goose Spit in half shorts and leggings like our daughters wear, or those fitness buffs who jog up from the parking lot to Mulholland and beyond. 165 steps to the pullout. Heartbreaks catch and release. Mother, mother, your sand bluffs, dunlins and plovers feasting at low tide, sandpipers, sanderlings, sand fleas, early risers. How young we were, all that fuel in the spirit lamp. Skewers of halibut, smoked black cod, strawberries dipped in chocolate, death by fondue with the kind of people who rent their cabin to a poet for $60 a month and lower the rent, having considered the state of both. Mother, mother, realtors mink the waterfront, potholes trip up the road to the main house and boat shed. Mother, your blue carbon salt marsh, ancestral midden. Option to rezone, bedlam. George says Kella is not sleeping nights. His kids are upset. Carol, Fran, and Ruth push through to stop the chainsaws. Mayday on Midden Road. And then the sinking of the Kella Lee, Queen Charlotte Sound, 2001. Wide-eyed halibut on crushed ice in the fish hold. Wind 80 knots from the south, 10-meter seas. She keeled over, starboard. Life raft painter line entangled with paravane boom and rigging. In the little brown church across from the bakery, a survivor doubles over. His legs belong to the sea. I see him. I see hands reaching out from pews, the way people half rise from their seats. View from the pullout. Mrs. Clifton called the spit pelch, round on point. Pelch. The sound of clams and cockles at the end of an ice age. An oxymoron if I ever heard one. Then again, maybe not, if the point is moonlit in the shape of things. Like who gets to stay here and for how long?
Damn, 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 damn. Couple of lines. One was about the lamp. I didn't note it. I couldn't write in this book. I couldn't highlight. I couldn't use pencil. I still have the plastic that it was in, delivered in, and so I can't write in it, which is very rare for me. Something about all that fuel in the spirit lamp was one I noted, and
Yeah.
there was another one, but I forget. The question that is running through my mind is this is this is a picture perfect example of a bioregional poem, deeply connected to place, it was painting the scene as it is or as it was. I think even working its magic. You write a poem about this, and then a year or two later, the place is preserved. You talk about magic. So I know we don't set out to write bioregional poems. We set out to write poems, and we are bioregionalists. So what about bioregionalism appeals to you? Why do you find it attractive or interesting?
I guess it's because it's where I am. It's where I am. It's where I live, and so it just comes naturally. There's not. I don't know a lot about other things, but I know a lot about where I am. Um, and by know a lot, I mean a lot of sort of the people who have lived here, but also the felt sense of being here. Um, so in this poem, all that fuel in the spirit lamp, for example, is the Newson. the Newson House, which is on the waterfront, um, at the entrance to the driveway, which is a very long, winding driveway through the hectares of forest to the shore. Well, at the edge of that driveway, that little cabin and the poet who rented it for $60 a month was Brad Robinson. So, I mean, my
I didn't know that. I
there.
didn't.
So there, the secret is out. Like this is it's like Michael McClure said that we swirl out who we are and
We swirl out
watch
what we
for
are and watch what returns.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Um, so there is a kind of a delight in that.
Yeah.
The all that fuel in the spirit lamp. I was at a New Year's Eve party, this would be in my 20s, in that house, and there were fondue pots. And I actually ended up passing out because all the windows were closed. So I fainted. But
But it
anyway,
wasn't from the fondue.
no, the fondue was delicious. Um,
What was it? Was it cheese
anyway,
or
I
was it
can't remember the
sweets?
question now. What's
Wait,
that?
what was the I'm now I'm more interested in the fondue. Was it cheese or
Oh, no,
sweets?
no, no. It was cod and strawberries dipped in chocolate and lots of different seafoods. And
Yeah. Well, the question was about bioregionalism, and I think
sorry, I
you
went off
definitely
track.
no, you definitely answered it. But here's the other part of that question is, you know, what gives people in the United States the right to say this is our bioregion, and by the way, everything west of the Continental Divide in BC is part of it too, like it or not. I mean, I'm thinking about the current, administration in the United States, what they've said about Canada, how hurtful I feel about it, how I would fight for the Canadians if there was ever war, and I'm wondering how does that at all taint any kind of appreciation of bioregionalism, or you or not, I
Oh,
guess.
yeah, no, it doesn't taint it. It deeply saddens me, and it speaks of the great disconnect that we human beings have as a species, and the way trauma perpetuates that. And I think poetry is one way of trying to stay connected to our humanity. Um, and so yeah, bioregionalism is what it is. This is where we all live, and yeah, let's try not to let some things divide us, and at the same times, we need to stand up for what is ethical and humane.
Elbows up.
Elbows up.
Right. I'm going to ask a personal question, and if you want to pass on it, you're welcome to do so, but I think it'd be interesting. Um, you had reticence to be interviewed, expressing to me, and I didn't save the text or email or wherever it was, but that your work was not as important as guests that I usually have on this program. Well, I think everything you've done to this point makes that untrue. But um, how do you manage the kind of anonymity uh, with a human desire to have validation? I mean,
Mm.
seeking outside validation, my Soto Zen teacher likens it to drinking seawater. You know, you can't be satisfied by it, and yet, on some level, we're happy when we get a book. You were beaming that night at Artful Gallery in Courtney. And to be honest with you, you're equal to in terms of consciousness to anyone I've ever had on this program. So, but it's hard sometimes to reconcile. And maybe there are some self-esteem issues. I know there are in me, but I mean, how do you deal with this notion that the important poets are the poets who get $120,000 grants or become poets laureate or any of these other kinds of trappings, big publications, impressive publishing houses publishing their work, so on and so forth.
Mm. Well, it's a good question, Paul. I think, I am a shy person at by character. Um, and my fear in doing an interview like this is sometimes I just can't find the words, in the ways that I've seen and listened to your interviews and just how eloquent people are in speaking about the poetics. And my way of being in the world um, is a little shyer, a little slower. And so there were some fears about that, and I really appreciate your patience in waiting for me to find my way forward. Because, I mean, yes, I mean, you've named the other side of it, which is how delightful it is to have, to hold this beautiful book, to feel it in my hands. Um, this has been a dream of mine since I was a child. So I think it's just it's the it's that paradox I think you've named of, let me hide under a nice cozy little rock here. And what you miss by doing that is you don't get to be out in the world and you don't get to shine. And um, yes, I struggle with those two pieces in something like an interview. Not so much in the reading of my poem or poetry. I love doing that, but explaining myself is another thing.
Well, I don't know that I seek explanation, but illumination on why you made certain choices and how you do what you do. I think it's a struggle for me to abandon a non-normative syntax and to find the syntax appropriate to each poem rather than a kind of syntax that is is done for outside consumption or any other such superficial reasons. So that was one question that I wondered about, and I think it's just brilliant, and I want to steal some of that fire. I mean, that's part of what drives what I do. I'd love it if you read one last poem, and I don't know if Kusum would be something that would appeal to you as a sort of a closing gesture, but um,
Sure.
that's what I picked out when I was doing my preparation. It's near the end of the book, page 31. And
Okay, yeah. And that's really fitting as well, Paul, because this Couscous restoration project has just been completed. So I won't say more. I'll read the poem. Couscousum. 1. Field sawmill. Ghost bodies on platforms in trees, retaining walls at the river's edge. Log booms tugged in the memory waters, past Hollyhock Marsh, upriver to the mill. Ross and Marty on the green chain, yellow cedar 4x4s, treble beep of forklifts, front end loaders, ambient bandsaws bite and zing. Love it or hate it, concedes a waitress serving honey buns across the river from the lumber yard. Downstream, bones in the midden, winged chevron of fish traps, storied tumble of salmon. Estuary, the tidal mouth of a large river, mud mouth, salt chew. 2. We the marsh, lost fish, we heart and flank the watershed, pave and unpaved paradise, dismantle the wall, install it in a Kengerberic forest of old cars, rust and moss. We hawk and plover, crab and flounder, loon and grebe, other the marsh. Salmon diminish, picked off by seals at the killing wall. The mill closes, salt marsh fills in. toxins in the surface clay. Orphans of the living sediment, we face the stars water-eyed, hunger for the cold sea to toss and return the story, begin again with Pacific sankfoil, tufted hair grass, herring roe in the eelgrass, camas and shooting stars. Begin again with a village and a name.
Such fantastic work, such depth of consciousness, so well delivered. What a joy it is to be able to present your story through this podcast and this interview. Lorin, what a joy it is to know you. Thank you for your time today.
You're welcome, Paul. Thank you so much.
On the way to Kluusms, Lorin Medley from Watershed Press, Poems from Cascadia.